Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Monday. They seem to roll around pretty quick, or is that just me that happens to? So today I will be talking about the investigations that you can do and some treatment goals that you should be aiming for in IBS. So I'm Ange Sinclair and I'm the Digestive Detective. Today we're talking all about IBS, and we talked about it a fair bit last week. And when it comes to visiting your doctor, there's some other conditions that need to be ruled out at the same time. So the first one is post-infectious IBS, and I spoke about this quite a bit last week. So this is where you have a gastro infection or you've had food poisoning and you've never been well since. So this happens generally due to a dysbiosis, which just means an imbalance of good and bad bacteria. And it can last for a very long time. So up to 40 years it can last for. So you have to treat it to change the bacteria levels, or it won't go back to how it was without the intervention. My hair's doing its own thing today. Sorry about that. Celiac disease. So this is a biggie and often gets overlooked. So many people are walking around as undiagnosed celiacs. So if you have chronic diarrhea, get tested for celiac is essential. So there's a gene test and so both blood tests. There's a gene test that's a blood test and a normal celiac test. Worth doing. You need to be eating gluten for it for the normal test to show up. But if you have the genes, you have the genes. So it doesn't matter whether you're eating gluten or not. But it's essential to do this one. So many people overlook it. The doctor assumes everybody's been tested for celiac, and that's just not true. So that's my biggest tip. Celiac. Thyroid conditions, whether there is an overactive thyroid or an underactive thyroid. So they both present the same way that IBS does. So an overactive thyroid presents with diarrhea, and an underactive thyroid usually presents with constipation. So you could easily be mistaken for IBS. Thyroid testing is something that some doctors are a little bit reluctant to do as well. So I always say to clients, ask specifically for a thyroid test, especially if you've had chronic diarrhea or chronic constipation for a long time and that's never been investigated. Thyroid. So the next one, lactose and fructose malabsorption. So they can both present with diarrhea, and lactose malabsorption can sometimes present with constipation and diarrhea. So you can see that there's a really fine line between picking what's IBS and what's not IBS. So it's really good to get the investigation to rule these out. So parasites is my next one. So two of the most common parasites I see are Blastocystis hominis and Dientamoeba fragilis. They can both mimic the symptoms of IBS, especially the diarrhea type. If you pick up the parasite Giardia, this can also lead to other functional bowel diseases, which IBS is a type. So it's best to deal with them at the infection stage. So get them treated as soon as you can. So antibiotics is the next one. So I have seen as little as one dose of antibiotics cause people to develop symptoms of IBS and then create dysbiosis in the bowel, that imbalance. So catching this early is always the key to getting better quickly. I always say to people, don't take antibiotics unless you really, really need them. You know, if it's a life and death emergency, especially if you've had antibiotic on top of antibiotic on top of antibiotic, it's not a great thing for your bowel, because bowel bacteria takes at least 4 years to recover from one dose of antibiotics. So just be mindful of that. The next thing that I think is a really good thing to think about is Crohn's disease or colitis. So inflammation of the colon, essentially. Both of these have a similar picture as IBS. That's why you really need to get a diagnosis from the doctor. Crohn's can be a life-threatening illness, so you really need to get that checked out properly. So you also may have altered digestive secretions, and that can happen due to nutritional deficiencies, which can change how your gastric acid, your hydrochloric acid, and your pancreatic enzymes work. These can all be tested by your doctor as well. And there's two more. So the last two is one, you want to check for SIBO. So this is not something your GP can help you with. You'll have to find a nutritionist, a naturopath, or a functional integrative doctor, because normal GPs don't think that this is a thing. 80% of people who are diagnosed with IBS have symptoms of SIBO. So what is SIBO? I'll give you a better rundown in the next 2 weeks, but essentially it's an overgrowth of bacteria in your small intestines that has come up from your large intestines, and depending on the bacteria, you might have constipation or diarrhea. One of the big things for this one for me is generally I ask people about their level of bloating. Do they get more bloated as the day goes on? If that's a yes, then generally that's a SIBO thing. The other thing they tell me too is they get this really tight, sharp pain somewhere up under their ribs that feels like somebody's pulling a really big belt tight. So that's a common thing I hear too. And the last one is food. So food is the most common trigger for IBS. However, it's not the only trigger. So while investigating the foods through an elimination type diet, you also need to look at what else is causing this picture. Essential to be tested to all these other things we've just talked about, because it could be more than one thing, which lots of people don't think about. So to get the greater success in IBS, you need to find the cause. So some treatment outcomes that we're looking for is to improve the transit speed. So if you're constipated, we need to speed it up. If it's too fast, we need to slow it down. So improve how the entire bowel works. That's really, really helpful in IBS. Fix leaky gut is if there's any, and there generally is. If there's IBS, there's generally leaky gut can go along with this. So decrease nauseousness in some people. Decrease abdominal distension is one of the aims too, and that's like we talked about in SIBO. So correct any imbalance in the gut bacteria. That's a biggie because there is always some. Fix any what's the word I'm going to say here? Neurotransmitter dysfunction. So, we serotonin's in our gut. If our gut's not working properly, our serotonin's not working properly, then our melatonin is not working properly, and we're likely to have problems with sleep and mood and all of those sorts of things. So getting that all working great is good as well. My hair, is just doing its own thing this morning. Improve our stomach function. So make sure you have enough enzymes and hydrochloric acid to break down the foods, because the longer those foods sit and ferment, the more chance you have of getting small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Manage the stress. This is the biggie. People don't think that stress is a factor in IBS, but it certainly is, because remember, when we get stressed, our gut bacteria is being impacted and it causes some of them to die. So stress is a huge one. Identify and treat any food intolerance or allergies. So they're the biggest things that I would go through in a treatment plan. So if you've been diagnosed with IBS, don't despair. There is help available. So book in for a free 15-minute consult. So if you're on this Facebook post, it's in the post above. If you're on Instagram, the link is in the bio. And for LinkedIn, the link is in the comments. So I offer a free 15-minute, and I give you an action plan of what to do first and where to go next. So that's, and then you've got a pathway to move forward, because what I see with people with IBS, they get so caught up in the day-to-day, they can't actually see the forest for the trees and can't move themselves out of it. So they're my biggest tips. Have a fantastic day, everyone. Enjoy the sunshine if you're in Sydney today. Again, it's a magnificent day. And I'll be back tomorrow morning for Transformation Tuesday. See you then. Bye.